There are moments when the hardest thing to admit is not that life is difficult. Most of us can say that. We can talk about the pressure, the stress, the disappointment, the exhaustion, the people involved, the circumstances that are not changing, and the things that feel unfair. But James brings us to a deeper and more uncomfortable place. He asks us to look not only at what is happening around us, but at what is happening inside of us. Because pressure does not only reveal pain, sometimes pressure reveals desire. It reveals what we reach for when we want relief. It reveals what we believe will satisfy us when God feels slow. It reveals what we are tempted to justify when obedience becomes costly. James 1:13-18 is not simply a passage about temptation as an idea. It is a passage that teaches us how to tell the truth when temptation becomes personal. It teaches us not to blame God for the pull of sin. It teaches us to name the desire that is being baited, to interrupt sin before it grows, to question the lie instead of trusting it. And most importantly, it teaches us to return to the God who gives good gifts and brings his people to life through the word of truth. So this study is meant to move slowly. We are not trying to rush through the passage or gather as much information as possible. We are going to let James search us. We are going to let the text ask us honest questions. We are going to sit with the difference between what temptation promises and what God gives. Because temptation always tells a story. It tells a story about God, about sin, about satisfaction, about escape, about what we need, and about what will happen if we disobey. James calls us to ask whether that story is true. So as we come to James 1:13, we need to refuse the false story about God. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God can't be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. James begins by stopping one particular sentence before it leaves our mouths. I am tempted by God. He knows how easily the human heart shifts blame. When temptation rises, we often want to explain it by pointing somewhere else. We point to the pressure. We point to another person. We point to our past, our weakness. Sometimes, even if we would never say it directly, we point to God. It might sound like this. If God had not allowed this, I would not be struggling. Or if God had answered sooner, I would not feel so desperate. If God had made me differently, this would not be so hard. The words may not be openly rebellious, but underneath them, there can be a quiet suspicion that God is somehow responsible for the temptation we feel. James tells us not to let that thought settle in the heart. God may allow a trial. God may test faith. He may expose what is hidden, use difficult circumstances to mature endurance. But we have to remember that God does not lure his children into evil. He is not secretly working against our holiness. He is not placing sin in front of us as bait. He is not trying to make us fail. This matters because if we become suspicious of God in temptation, we will pull away from the very one that we need. If we believe God is somehow against us, we will not run to Him honestly. We will hide. We will accuse, self-protect, try to manage temptation on our own strength while mistrusting the Father who offers help. So the first act of obedience in this passage is not outward action. It is inward refusal. Refuse the false story that God is tempting you. Refuse the lie that God is cruel, careless, manipulative, or withholding. Refuse the thought that His holiness makes Him unsafe to approach. God is not embarrassed by your need for help. He is not surprised by your weakness. He is not the author of the evil pulling at you. The one who calls you to resist is not secretly enticing you towards it. When I am tempted to believe that God is making this harder on purpose, James calls me to remember that God tempts no one with evil. When we are tempted to believe God must be withholding something good, James calls us to remember God is the giver of every truly good gift. When we want to believe that God is unsafe to approach in weakness, James tells us that God gives wisdom, life, and truth to His people. When we are tempted to believe that our circumstances forced us to sin, James says temptation must be faced honestly before God. So let's take a break here for a second. Ask yourself where you may have allowed disappointment to turn into suspicion. Where have you quietly blamed God for the place where desire is pulling you? Where have you confused the pressure God allowed with a temptation He did not produce? A simple prayer might be something like, Father, I will not accuse you for what sin is doing in me. Help me to trust your character while I face my own heart honestly. James 1:14. Name the desire beneath the temptation. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own lust and enticed. James now turns the light inwards. If God is not the source of temptation, then we have to ask where the pull is coming from. His answer is uncomfortable because it is personal. Each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desire. This does not mean every desire is evil. We were created with desires. We desire food, rest, love, safety, belonging, justice, beauty, and joy. The problem is not that we desire. The problem is that desire can become disordered. A desire can become demanding. A desire can move from, I would like this, to, I must have this. A desire can become willing to step outside the will of God in order to get what it wants. Temptation becomes powerful when it finds something in us that is willing to listen. That is why it can feel so convincing. It does not usually arrive as something completely foreign. It often speaks to something we already want. It says, you deserve relief. You need control. You've waited long enough. It says, you should not have to feel this. This will make you feel seen. This will give you the comfort God has not given. It might say, this will protect you. This will prove you are right. James gives us a practice here. Name the desire. Do not only name the temptation, name what the temptation is using. If the temptation is anger, the desire underneath may be control, vindication, respect, or revenge. If the temptation is dishonesty, the desire underneath may be approval, security, reputation, or escape. If the temptation is lust, the desire underneath may be pleasure, comfort, intimacy, power, or relief from loneliness. If it is envy, the desire may be recognition, significance, or the belief that God has been better to someone else than he has been to you. Naming the desire does not excuse the sin. It brings the battle into the light. It helps us to stop fighting only at the surface. We do not merely ask, "What did I do?" We ask, "What was I wanting? What did I believe I needed? What did I think obedience would cost me? What did I think that sin would give me?" This is where the passage becomes deeply practical. The goal is not shame for the sake of shame. The goal is clarity. You cannot surrender a desire you refuse to name. You cannot bring into prayer what you keep hidden even from yourself. Temptation may appear as harsh speech. The desire may be control, vindication, being heard, being right, secret compromise, escape, comfort, relief, pleasure, envy, recognition, significance, comparison, resentment, dishonesty, security, approval, reputation, fear of consequences, withdrawal from obedience. The desire may be self-protection, avoidance, disappointment, or unbelief, bitterness, justice without surrender, revenge, refusal to forgive. Let's not rush past this. Let's allow the Spirit to search gently and truthfully. Let's ask ourselves, what desire has been pulling me lately? Not in vague terms, but honestly. Is it comfort? Is it control? Approval? Escape? Revenge? Is it pleasure? Maybe it's security, recognition, the desire to be right or to stop feeling weak. Then we must bring that desire to God without dressing it up. You do not have to make it sound more spiritual than it is. You can pray, "Lord, this is what I want. This is where I feel the pull. This is where I am tempted to believe disobedience will help me. Teach me to want what is good in the right way, at the right time, under your authority." James 1:15 is where it talks about that we must interrupt the progression early. Then the lust, when it has conceived, bears sin. The sin, when it is full grown, produces death. James does not describe sin as something standing still. He describes it as something that grows. Desire conceives. Desire gives birth to sin. Sin matures and ultimately produces death. That picture is sobering because it means sin has a progression. It may begin quietly, it may begin inwardly. It might begin with a thought that we keep returning to, a fantasy we keep feeding, resentment we keep justifying, or that compromise we keep minimizing. Maybe it's a conversation with ourselves where we slowly make room for what God forbids. By the time sin becomes visible, something has often already been happening beneath the surface. The heart has been negotiating. The desire has been rehearsing. Our conscience has been pushed aside, and the warning signs have been ignored. Ultimately, the line has been moved. James is merciful enough to show us the progression so we can interrupt it early. He is not saying this to crush us. He is saying it to wake us up before sin grows stronger. This is where application becomes very concrete. Ask yourself, where is the earliest point where I can interrupt this? Maybe the interruption is closing the app, ending the conversation. Maybe it's confessing the resentment before it becomes bitterness, telling the truth before the lie grows roots, refusing to rehearse the fantasy. Maybe it is an apology before pride hardens, or asking someone to pray before secrecy gives temptation more room. Sometimes we ask God for strength at the moment when sin is already full grown, but we've ignored the earlier places where grace was calling us to stop. James invites us to become attentive to the beginning, not because God is unwilling to forgive later, but because sin is never safer when it is allowed to grow. There is a kindness in early resistance. There is mercy in bringing desire into the light before it conceives. Wisdom in treating a small compromise as spiritually serious. Not because God is fragile, but because we are. So let's pause and ask, what is one progression that needs to be interrupted right now? Not someday, not generally, right now. What pattern has been moving from desire towards sin? What has been gaining strength because it has remained unnamed? What have you been calling small that James would call dangerous? What have you been managing privately that needs to be confessed honestly? A prayer in this moment might be something like, Lord, show me the earliest place where I need to turn around. Give me grace not only to grieve sin after it happens, but to resist it before it grows. And as we move to James 1:16, we come to questioning the lie. Don't be deceived, my beloved brothers. This is one of the shortest verses in the passage, but it may be the one that we need to hear most often. Don't be deceived. Temptation depends on deception. It does not usually show the whole story. It shows the bait, not the hook, the relief, but not the slavery. It shows the pleasure, but not the emptiness afterwards. The escape, but the ultimate distance from God. The feeling of control, not the loss of spiritual clarity. And James speaks tenderly here. He says, my beloved brothers. This is not a cold warning. It is the voice of love. Love tells the truth when a lie is dangerous. Love interrupts the path that leads to death. Love does not flatter someone walking towards a cliff. So one of the most important practices in temptation is to slow down and question the story being told. Temptation always has a narrative. It interprets the moment for you. It tells you what you need, what God is denying. It tells you what obedience will cost and what sin will provide. But James says, do not be deceived. Do not accept temptation's version of reality without testing it against the word of truth. Ask, what is this temptation promising me? Then we should ask, can it actually give what it promises? What is it hiding from me? What will this produce if it grows? We should ask, what does the temptation want me to believe about God? What does it want me to forget? To be clear, this kind of questioning is not overthinking, it is spiritual alertness. It is refusing to let a lie preach unchecked to our souls. Here are some questions to ask in temptation. What is this promising? Why does this matter? It exposes the false hope attached to the desire. Question: what is this hiding? It uncovers the consequence temptation once concealed. What does this say about God? It reveals whether suspicion of God is underneath the pull. Question: what does this say about sin? It shows whether sin is being minimized or excused. And lastly, what would obedience look like right now? Why does this matter? It moves reflection towards faithful action. Do not only say, I am tempted. Say, a story is being told to me right now, and I need to know whether it is true. If the temptation says God is withholding, we should answer with James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above. If it says this will give life, we answer with James 1:15. Sin, when full grown, produces death. If the temptation says this is who you are, answer with James 1:18. God has brought his people forth by the word of truth. A simple prayer might be, Father, make me awake to the lie. Do not let me be led by a promise that cannot keep itself. Teach me to trust what you have said more than what temptation suggests. Return to the Father of lights. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom can be no variation nor turning shadow. That's James 1:17. James does not only tell us to reject sin, he tells us to look at God. This matters because temptation is not defeated only by seeing sin's danger. It is also defeated by seeing God's goodness. If we only say sin is bad, but we still believe sin offers something better than God, the heart will remain divided. The deeper battle is not only between right and wrong, it is between a false good and the true giver. It is between the promise of sin and the generosity of the Father. James says, every good gift and every perfect gift comes from above. That means God is not against joy. God is not against life. He's not against fullness. He is the source of every true good. Temptation offers the counterfeit gifts. God gives good and perfect gifts. This is where the heart needs to practice gratitude, not as a sentimental exercise, but as resistance. Gratitude trains the soul to recognize the giver. It says, God has not left me empty. God has not stopped being good. God is not defined by this one unmet desire. God's goodness is broader than what temptation is showing me right now. James calls him the Father of lights. That phrase lifts our eyes. The God who made the lights is not himself shifting like a shadow. Created lights rise and set. Shadows move. Seasons change. Our feelings change. So do our circumstances. But God does not become less good when life becomes more difficult. He does not become less holy when temptation becomes stronger. He does not become less generous when one desire remains unmet. This is not abstract theology. This is stability for the tempted soul. When temptation says God is not enough, James says, look again at the Father of lights. When temptation says God is withholding, James says every good and perfect gift comes from Him. When temptation says this moment defines reality, we must remember that there is no variation or turning shadow in Him. So let's take a break and name the good gifts. Not generically, specifically. What are some gifts that we can name? The gift of Scripture. Scripture is God's love letter to us. That should be an honor. The God of the universe, the same God that called everything into existence and sustains everything, is the one that has reached down to sinful men. The gift of conviction, the gift of a warning before sin grows. Forgiveness, the gift of a friend who tells the truth. Of endurance you did not think you had. Daily bread, the gift of beauty, the gift of the gospel, the gift of being able to return to God even after failure. Now, to be clear, gratitude does not deny the battle. It reorients the heart inside the battle. It reminds us that temptation is not the only voice speaking. The Father is still giving. The Father is still good. The Father has not changed. A prayer for this section might be, Father of lights, turn my eyes back to your goodness. Teach me to recognize true gifts. Do not let temptation convince me that you are withholding life from me. Anchor me in your unchanging character. And finally, we come to James 1:18. Of his own will, he gave birth to us by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. James ends this section with life. After showing us that desire gives birth to sin and sin produces death, he shows us something greater. God gives birth to his people through the word of truth. This is the hope that keeps the passage from becoming only a warning. Yes, temptation is real. Desire must be named. Sin must be resisted early. Deception must be exposed. But the believer is not merely a person with strong desires trying to become more disciplined. The believer is someone God has brought forth by His own will. That means your deepest identity is not the temptation that pulls at you. It is not the desire that has been loud this week. It's not the sin you are ashamed to confess. Not the old pattern that feels familiar. If you belong to Christ, God has brought you forth by the word of truth. Temptation tries to shrink your identity down to appetite. God tells you that you have been made new. Temptation says, this desire is who you are. God, on the other hand, says, you are mine. Temptation says, you cannot change. But God says, I have brought you forth by truth. Temptation might come back with, death is inevitable. And God wins the war with, I give life. This does not make the fight easy, but it makes the fight hopeful. You are not fighting for a new identity. You are fighting from the identity God has given. You're not trying to create life inside yourself. You are learning to live from the life God has already given. James says that believers are a kind of first fruits of His creatures. First fruits points to a harvest. They are evidence that more is coming. That means God's work in His people is not random or small. When God brings someone to life through the word of truth, that person becomes a sign of His renewing work. Our obedience matters because it bears witness to the life that God gives. So the final application for all of us is not simply to try harder. It is much deeper than that. It's live as one who has been brought forth by God. Bring your desires under the truth that gave you life. Bring your temptations into the light of your new identity, your weakness to the Father who does not change. We can ask ourselves, what would it look like today to live from the new birth instead of old desire? Maybe it would look like confession instead of hiding. Maybe it would look like gratitude instead of suspicion. Asking for help instead of pretending that you are strong. Maybe it would look like deleting something, apologizing to someone, extending forgiveness to someone, telling the truth. Maybe it's ending a pattern or returning to Scripture before the lie gets louder. The action does not have to be dramatic to be faithful. Sometimes obedience begins with one honest prayer, one interrupted thought, one exposed desire, a single choice to believe God's goodness again. James 1:13-18 gives us a path to walk when temptation rises. It does not leave us with vague guilt. It gives us a way to respond. God tempts no one, and our response should be, I will not blame God for the pull of sin. The passage, each one is tempted by his own desire. Our response should be, I will name the desire being baited. Desire gives birth to sin, and sin produces death. I will interrupt the progression early. Do not be deceived. I will question the lie temptation is telling. Every good gift comes from the Father of lights. I will return to God's unchanging goodness. And lastly, God brought us forth by the word of truth. I will live from the new birth, not old desire. And let's take these movements personally. Let them become a prayer. Father, I will not blame you for temptation. You are holy, and you do not lure your children into evil. Forgive me for the times I have made you responsible for what my own desires were doing in me. Show me the desire being baited. Help me to name it honestly. If it is comfort, let me bring that desire to you. If it is control, let me surrender it. If it's approval, let me remember that I belong to you. If it's escape, teach me to seek refuge in you instead of sin. Help me interrupt sin before it grows. Give me grace to stop at the early places before desire conceives and before compromise becomes a pattern. Make me willing to confess, willing to flee, to obey, and to receive help. Keep me from being deceived. Teach me to question the story temptation tells. Let me see the bait and the hook. Let me remember that sin does not give what it promises. Let me trust your word more than my appetite, my fear, my anger, or my longing. Restore my confidence in your goodness. You are the Father of lights. Every good and perfect gift comes from you. There is no variation in you, no turning shadow, no hidden darkness, no change in your character. Teach me to live as one brought forth by your word of truth. Let my life bear witness to the new birth that you have given. Let me fight temptation not as someone abandoned, but as someone made alive. Let me walk today as one who belongs to you. And in closing, temptation wants us to live in confusion. It wants us confused about God, confused about desire, sin, consequences, and ultimately who we are. But James brings clarity. God is not the tempter. Desire must be named. Sin grows if it is entertained. Deception must be questioned. God is good and unchanging, and the believer has been brought forth by the word of truth. So when temptation comes, do not only ask, how do I stop feeling this? Ask, what story is being told to me right now? What desire is being baited? What lie needs to be exposed? What good gift from God am I forgetting? What would it mean to act as someone made alive by the word of truth? Then we take the next faithful step. Not every step, not the whole future, just the next faithful step in the light. Because sin produces death, but God gives life. Temptation deceives, but God speaks truth. Desire pulls away, but the Father draws his people back. And the God who brought you forth by his own will is not finished forming you into a life that bears witness to him.